And we are live. What's going on YouTube Live? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Tuesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. If it is Tuesday, you should already know what that means. It's time for a first row Intersation. I got to get a sign for the first row Intersation. I got the Wednesday word. I got to find out what the sign is going to be for the first row Intersation. You guys let me know something. If you guys got something, send me something directly so I can start putting my hands to that. Anyway, tonight's topic is on the provider role. That is with my great big cousin, bigger than me by far, taller. I don't know where you got these tall jeans from and these muscles from, but my cousin, Bryan Smith. Bryan, can you say hello and what's up to the people, please?
What's up to the people? How you guys doing out there?
There are already people coming in. Oh, man, there's some people. Actually, we are international tonight. My cousin is online from Japan. So he's stationed over in Japan. So he's up right now. So he's in the wee hours of the morning. Anyway, jumping into tonight's topic, the provider role. But before we even jump in, I'm sorry, let me start by sharing for those who are new to the concept of intersation, what an intersation is. Intersation is simply when you take an interview and a conversation, you merge those two together, you get intersation. Not quite an interview, not quite a conversation, somewhere in between. And so fortunately in my life, I have an abundance of friends, family, as tonight is family, relatives, friends, co-workers, doesn't matter. I have a plethora of relationships. And in those relationships, we have tons and tons of conversations. And those conversations tend to go beyond the surface level of, how was your day? How's life going? Into more deep and meaningful things, such as, what does that mean to you? Why do you think that way? What have you learned from that? And so what Intersations is a means to me opening up a literal lens into those conversations so that the growth that I experience from those conversations and the other people experience from those conversations can be shared with a visual audience. So though tonight you will see me and Bryan and I interacting back and forth visually, realize that Intersations is a interactive environment. So we want you to contribute to the conversation. If you're watching live in the live chat, we want you to ask questions. We want you to give feedback, give advice, give nuggets, and just generally participate, interact with each other or interact with us. So though you'll see us live back and forth, realize this is a group conversation, a group discussion for all of us to gain growth from. So if there's something that you have you want to ask, please don't be shy, be transparent and ask it. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Nobody's going to carry you. They're all going to laugh at you. Nobody's going to do all that. So you'll be fine. Just jump in. Don't be shy. With that, let's get started with tonight. I want to give my cousin Bryan an opportunity to truly introduce himself because the provider role is a very important role. I think that we'll find out why you feel that way. But could you please share a little bit about yourself, what your thoughts are about this? I'm sorry, not about this topic, but what your thoughts are for about being on this Intersation and what has really attracted you to the first row to share, because this is your second time on here.
Well, that was a lot of questions. I need a pen and paper so I can keep track of this. A little bit about myself. All right. So as Billy said, I'm his first cousin. I work in the financial industry. Mainly I manage a group that deals with insurance, employer taxes, benefits, payroll, you name it. In the financial industry, my organization kind of deals with it. I am a father of 5. I have 2 sons and 3 daughters. My sons are the oldest. And my kids range from 33 and my youngest is 7. So Bryan started over. So the role of a provider is important to me, very important to me. It's important to my kids as well. But before I get into that, what kind of drew me to the first row? I mean, anything that my cousin or anybody that's in my space that is doing something productive, I like to be a part of. And Billy reached out to me in my first Intersation a few months ago, to be a part of this, and I couldn't, how could I say no? And so I'm always available and willing to be a part of some positivity. So what does the role of a provider mean to me? This is going to be an interesting topic, because if you asked me this question like 20 years ago, you'd have probably got a different answer. I think the key word in this is provider, right? So I don't think a man's designation as a provider is based on how much money he makes. The role of provider is a lot more than that. I think is rooted in time, the accessibility to those that depend on you and rely on you, and I think is rooted in your level of engagement and responsibility.
I like that. Your level
Yeah,
of engagement and responsibility. And it's funny because that is not financial.
exactly, exactly.
So that was
Exactly. And with me, see, I'm old school, right? I believe in we all have our space and our place. However, like I said, as I got older, as we'll discuss later, that's kind of evolved a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and if we get some good feedback from the chat.
I think we will get really good feedback from the chat. We got some heavy hitters in here tonight. We even got my big brother almighty Damian Rowe, author Damian Rowe, the author of Modern Day Mentor, which will be soon to hit bookstores across the country and around the world. So definitely appreciate you guys all tuning in tonight live. So let's jump into this. We've actually already circumvented the very first question about what the topic means to you. There is one thing I want to share, because a lot of what you're saying is similar to my thoughts on being a provider.
Right.
But there's something that I have here from that I wrote on Facebook, and I was like, man, what really envelops what I think about being a provider? And it's something I wrote years ago. I wrote about, 6 years ago now. But it says, most of the time we only think of providing as a financial expression of support, but it encompasses complete provisions in their entirety. In French, the word vider means to empty, while the base Latin word means, base Latin word verdre means to see. For me, I interpret this in two ways. One, I am pro emptying myself and all that I have into my family. Two, I am pro showing my family the love that I have for them and how to show their future family that same love. And so when you say that provider, that it's not simply the financial aspects,
Right.
I think there are some financial accountabilities. That's really what it's about. It's about being for emptying yourself, being for giving of yourself to the people that you love, that you care about, that you want to see have better life situations or better experiences or better circumstances than you have or had. I think that is what that role of a provider is.
Right.
I'm really excited to explore this because we kind of discussed a little bit via email. This can kind of go any direction. So I'm very interested in seeing which direction this Intersation goes. And I'm happy to be on this journey and explore it with you. So with that, let's jump in. I hope you guys are ready. Hey, what's going on, John? I hope you guys are ready to get started. Let's actually jump in on the second question since you answered the first question. For you, because you're my big cousin, but you're actually older than me. You're born about what, 10 or what year were you born in?
68. I turned 51 last month.
Okay, so you were born 13 years before you were a teenager before I came on the scene.
Yeah.
So for you, who have been the providers in your life, like at that childhood age and into your adulthood age? Who have been those providers?
I think, well, initially it was my dad, right? So, and this is how the evolution takes place, because my dad was old school. He military. He worked for the Department of Correction for about 20 years. He was out of the house a good 16 hours a day. He was always working. And so, although we didn't have that emotional support, we understood financially why he wasn't in the home. So initially, it was that provider that provided financially. So as I got older, I looked at my basketball coach in high school and even in junior high school, and that's where some of the emotional support started to materialize. And those two, I think, shaped me as a provider, right? So I think it started off as I had a financial a mentor or a financial provider, and like I said, it morphed into something more of supportive with my basketball coach.
And so then, so that's like still in some ways still the childish nature, basketball, junior high, high school.
Oh yeah.
What about as an adult? Like, where did you start finding your providers as an adult?
So as an adult, you know, I had to figure out what I wanted to be in terms of provider, right? Because I didn't have a lot of role models as providers as an adult. So my oldest son was born when I was 18, and so I had to make some decisions then with respect to my level of engagement with him. And so some of the decisions I made was based on how I grew up, right?
Right.
You know, I had an example of a father who provided financially. Was that enough for me? No, it wasn't sufficient for me because I needed more. I wanted more, but I understood why I wasn't getting more.
Right.
And so as I became an adult and a father, I asked myself, what do I want to give my child? What do I want to give my children? I was already rooted in the financial piece of it. I wanted to provide my kids more emotional support than I received when I was a kid. And so I think that's where I kind of turned the corner on the type of provider I was going to be.
Okay. Really, it sounds like your paradigm changed because of what do they call it? The lack, or what is the word? Because the deficiency
Yeah.
in that emotional support and the things that you needed that you didn't have. You understood the financial support that you obviously needed as well, but
Right.
the emotional support that wasn't there made you kind of say, hey, I want to provide this and beyond. Yeah.
Right, because if you think about it, when you're growing up and you're subject to certain things, right? And as you grow up, there's two paths you're going to take. You're either gonna maintain the status quo, or you're going to change the trajectory in some kind of way and kind of morph into what it is that you want to be, or you destined to be. And with me, it was like, okay, I can provide financially, and I can go ahead and do my thing and take care of my kid that way, or I can give to my son financially, as well as be there for him in ways that my dad was not there for me.
Okay. So then I want to run through this story again from childhood to adulthood. However, I want you to run through it from the perspective of your role as a provider from childhood into adulthood, because I think that there are certain things that maybe I'll give you an example. There are certain things that I have provided in the circle of my friends that has been a constant from elementary school all the way through present. So like whether that's seeing somebody lonely on the playground and saying, hey, do you want to play with the group of people that I'm playing with? We're open to having you here, and providing that connection or providing that bridge for them to be able to hang out and spend time with us. Or, even now, not now in Utah, but even when I was in Sacramento, when I got older and had my own home, it was very much about bringing people to the house. I mean, you were there when we did our Cousin's Day, and having that barbecue, getting people together, connecting and making that bridge, whether it's family or friends. So that bridging component that I've always played as has been something that I've provided almost in every environment that I've been in, but it's been with me since childhood. For you, can you walk us through those different roles that you played when you were a child, where you were actually the provider and not the person receiving the provision?
I think, I can say supportive, definitely. And I'll give you an example. So in junior high school, I was in eighth grade, I think. I was in eighth grade. So we had this new kid come to the school. He didn't speak any English. But at PE, we would always go out to during the summer. We would play flag football. So we had our teams. Everybody was pretty much structured. New kid to the school. He wanted to play football. He couldn't communicate, and nobody wanted to pick him up.
Right.
And so I brought him onto my team. Come on, we're going to show you how to play football, and you're gonna roll with us. I went to my 30-year high school reunion a couple of years ago, and I saw this guy, and he said, "I remember when you taught me how to play football." And so that was 30 years ago. And so, I mean, and it made me feel good because it gave me a sense that I was actually contributing in a supportive way, back when I was in seventh grade. So I think certainly being supportive is something that I've carried throughout my childhood and my adult life. Supporting you is another example of just being supportive. I think there's also just being engaged with people. I've always been engaged with folks on a certain level, and it's not just one particular item or topic. I mean, just been engaged generally,
Mhm.
because I you know I like that level of engagement with folks. I like the cerebral, the conversations and whatnot. So being engaged and being supportive are two things I think I've carried throughout my childhood and my adulthood.
You actually bring up something. So I'm apologize right up front because I'm gonna be all over the place with this conversation.
Well, we knew that was going to happen, right?
Yes, I'm glad we had spoke about that before we started, because I'm gonna be every which way. And so this is not a question that I have or that I sent you. So if you need a second to think about it, take time. But one of the things you said in that is, I like, the validation that comes with being a supportive person.
Right.
And I think it should come with it. Don't get me wrong. But how do you feel about those times in life when we sometimes put ourselves in situations as the provider because we are seeking that validation? We're seeking that we're seeking that subscription on YouTube. We're seeking that that dopamine boost. We're seeking that as the provider. How should we really be looking to be the provider simply for the way it makes us feel?
Yeah, I think you can get yourself in trouble, trying to put yourself in a situation where you're trying to validate how you feel. Sometimes, in doing that, sometimes I think we're chasing the wrong thing, right?
Mhm.
I think in my life, a lot of and there might be some of that in my life, right? Because I think that there's been times where I've been in situations that didn't turn out as well as I thought it was going to turn out, and I kind of had to sit back and kind of reflect on what went wrong. And then sometimes I've had to ask myself, was this the right situation for you to be in? Why did you make the decisions that you made? So certainly you can put yourself in a less than ideal situation, chasing validation.
Right. Ooh, that rhymes. You should have been a rapper on that one. Less than ideal situation, chasing validation. I like
I
that.
think that's about as far as my rapping skills go, I think.
It so happens to rhyme. Let me catch us up really quick in the chat. It looks like from Damian Rowe, he says, good to be back, first row, to be a part of the live chat with all you leaders. Let's get with the business. True. John says, what's going on? Damian says, in my opinion, the mindset of a true provider suggests someone is depending on me to make all the right decisions to benefit their well-being. Therefore, defeat is not an option. All right, I like that. Hello, love you too, Sil. And then it looks like Janae is on.
Hey,
I'm glad you can make it, cousin. So we are all caught up. One of the that chasing validation thing, I think that gets us into trouble in many areas, not just in being a provider. However, I think that chasing that validation is what leads to that disappointment. And I can think about the times, as a young man growing up. I mean, not even a young man, a little boy growing up, and my mother would always make me hold the door for her when she would walk through the door. Like, you need to hold the door. Like, what if something happens out here and you first one in the building? Now we're all out here with the crazy person or whatever it may be, and you're now inside. Now, obviously, as a kid, she would probably want me to be inside and be safe. But as a man, when you're trying to learn manhood and what it is to be a provider and a protector, you want to be the guy outside to be able to create that space of safety for your family,
right,
for your loved one. And so I think about how, as I do that now, sometimes I'll do it and I'll hold the door open and the person doesn't say thank you. And I'm like, should have slammed the door in your face. But it's because I'm chasing that validation instead of just genuinely holding the door open. Because obviously, I'm not worried about protecting them should something happen. I don't know them like that. So I'm not a superhero. I'm not running around trying to save the day for everybody. But there is some of that validation in that, like, you know, hey, this is a good human being. They hold the door for people. They're not so hurried or in a rush that they are not considerate of people who are 2-3 steps behind them. So I think that validation component is probably going to come up again in this conversation. Is something that is critical to keep in check, because there, like I said, there's the supporting somebody and seeing them be successful. That is a validating experience, and it feels good. And it's not a bad thing that it feels good. It's like, great, I'm glad this support helped you get to where you need to be. But if you're only doing it so that they can get to where they need to be in order to feel that validation, it's like, wait, come on, you need to take this support and make it happen so that way I could get my reward.
Right.
Then you're on a slippery slope, and you're probably going to fall off the mountain. So,
well, I can tell you a litmus for me when it comes to that. So, you know, being a manager, you kind of have to separate, you know, some of the activity with the emotion, right? And so, you know, I had a supervisor that I was working with that was really struggling with communication. Not necessarily communicating effectively, but communicating appropriately.
Right.
And so as I'm coaching them through this, I got feedback that some of the other leaders were seeing a positive change. So in terms of validation, that made me feel great, right? I'm like, yeah, this worked. This is working. I wasn't looking for validation, but I just wanted him to be successful. But I remember how it made me feel when I got the feedback from other leaders.
Right.
And then there came a time where I had to separate his employment. And so in separating his employment, I didn't feel the way you felt when you opened the door and didn't get a thank you, right? And so being self-aware, and not allowing the validation piece to drive me, I can see that I've changed in that space. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't empathize with the fact that I just impacted someone's livelihood, but it didn't affect me the way it used to, or in a way, like I said, in which you open the door and it's like, wait a minute, I should have just kept the door closed had you opened the door yourself.
Right.
So that's an example where I think I've seen some growth in terms of that validation piece.
I think that's important, and this whole provider matrix it's flawed. It has its good days. It has its bad days.
Well, and it's draining. You know,
yes.
It's exhaustive, and it's nonstop.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny because it's also intentional. Like, I can say there are times in life, because there's natural things that we provide. Like I said earlier, there's times in life where you are naturally provide things that you don't even know that you're providing. And then somebody comes back 30 years later and says, hey, you provided this to me. And you're like, I haven't even given that a second thought. Like, not even like in a reoccurring dream or nightmare have I thought about that.
Right.
But I think that when you're intentional with what you are providing, I think that's where it really becomes important about what you want to provide, or as we always say on this network, what you want to give. Because just because you're providing it or just because you're giving it doesn't mean that it's going to get you that gratification. It doesn't mean that it's going to help that person that you're trying to help.
Right.
There's a question here in the chat from Mark Anthony I want to bring in. He says, how do you make time for yourself and keep your sanity when a lot of people depend on you? Bring that into the workplace, and then if you could bring it back to the personal.
That's a great question, and it's a huge responsibility. In the workplace, I don't think it's as heavy in the workplace as it is at home. Obviously, that, you know, that's how I'm paying my bills through working. But I have a team of 80 people across the country that essentially depend on me for everything, right? Some of the questions I get from some of my folks, I'm like, really? But they come to me because they know that I'm dependable.
Right.
So really, like you said, I don't know that I have an option when it comes to supporting my team at work, as well as supporting my family. I do what I do because that's what I do. Um, and then bringing it forward to the family, it's funny. I was in Seattle. I had a business trip a couple of weeks ago. And then I text my wife and I'm like, I don't realize how heavy my 7-year-old is in terms of just the amount of time that she demands from me, right? I was able to get some sleep. I was able to go to bed early. I was able to shower without somebody banging on the shower door talking about, Dad, you almost done. I told my wife I didn't realize how heavy she was, because after I leave my day job, I come home and it's job number 2 until I go to bed. And oftentimes, my mind don't stop when they go to bed, because that's opportunity to do what I need to do before I pass out.
Right.
But so some of the things that I try to do is I try to get out of the house and go work out, right? Get out of the house for an hour or two, throw some weights up, socialize with some other people. I spent 4 hours in the backyard, in the front yard, cutting the grass on Sunday. Just being outside, doing yard work is therapeutic. So I try to do things that I try to find me time. But even in that, there's times where I feel guilty, right? I'll go to the gym sometimes and feel like, okay, I should be at home taking care of something. And I'll have a tendency to want to cut my workout short. But I realize this is my time. I do need this time. And I kind of, finish up my routine. But it goes back to just being a provider. That's just something I'm so invested in that I don't know how to shut it off sometimes.
I know that hard to shut it off part, because it's like you're just constantly used to having these demands. But one of the things, and it's not even in the questioning, I think one of the things that's important as a provider is to learn how to say no.
Right.
That is one of the ways you maintain your sanity. Like right now, I have a lot of stuff that's pulling me in different directions, and so I have to be very cautious with my bandwidth on the things that I say yes to and the things that I say no to. And there's some things that I've had to say no to recently that I would love to say yes to. However, it's like the bandwidth is not there. And if I overextend the bandwidth, at some point, there's a breakdown in the provisions that I can provide. But from the professional world, just to touch base on Mark's question, from the professional world, what I've learned in the role of the provider at the workplace is it's important to train other providers. I think going back to that validation dopamine, we like the feeling of being the person that people come to and ask the questions, and you're now needed and you're respected and you're valued. And so those things make you feel good. However, it's okay to give up some of that limelight and to give up some of that shine to help develop other people, because at some point, as the leader mindset kicks in, it's not really about people always coming to you and asking you the question. It's about people coming to the people who used to ask you the questions and asking them the questions. So you start building these barriers, not negative barriers, but you start building these barriers that help protect your sanity and help protect your bandwidth to direct it in other places.
Right.
So I think that's one of the important aspects, especially if you have a team that you manage. Mark, I believe you have a team that you manage. It's important to train those providers, those co-providers, and realize part of that is identifying their strengths. I mean, if you're not gifted in math, I'm not going to train you to be a math provider. But if you're great in English, I'll say, this is what I do with math. Here's how you might be able to apply that to English.
Right. Yeah, delegation is definitely key. One of the things I do, though, at work that I started doing recently is 3 before me. So when I have my team come to me asking me questions, they have to give me what 3 things have you done to resolve your issue before you come to me. And so they have to tell me, well, I leverage a mentor, I check the knowledge portal, or whatever the case may be. They need to kind of examine 3 resources before they come to me, which has been working out pretty good.
Right. Because hopefully you find the answer before you have to come.
Right.
Sylvia, I hope that answers your question, Mark. Sylvia says, my me time is often in the car with my music turned up. Yeah, there's times my kids would come out to the car because I'd pull up in the driveway and I'd stay in the car and I'd either like be on a conversation or be listening to music or just like on my phone, not doing too much, but spending that time in my car where it's like, okay, before the next section or next segment, like you said, job number 2 kicks in. Let me just take a moment. And then all of a sudden I'm like down and I hear a kid knocking on my window. Hey, dad. Oh, okay. I got you. It's time to go in. And I do that. I even do that now with Z living here with me. I spend time. I'll pull up in the carport and I'll sit there and I'll listen to music or I'll write some notes or whatever it may be. But that is my me time. That is my sanctuary, where I don't have somebody or anything that's necessarily pulling on me. If I want to turn my phone off and sit in the carport, any emergency, I can make it 17 steps to the front door. So
right.
It looks like before we move forward on the next question, and let's catch up in the chat because 3 things just came in. From Bob McKinley, from a work perspective, you need to carve out a closed door window of 30 minutes a day to get your focus going and to keep interruptions out of the way. In 30 minutes, I could get 60 minutes of work. True. Yeah, that is true. Damien has a question. He says, as a provider and as a man, was there ever a time when you were too overwhelmed with your financial responsibilities that you had to ask for help? If so, how did it make you feel?
That's a good question. I don't know that any of us haven't been financially strapped at some point, right? You know, I remember when I started this job with this company 15 years ago. You know, I remember I was making $8.80 every 2 weeks. It was $11 an hour. I remember like it was just yesterday. And so I had a car someone had given to me. I mean, if worst case scenario, the job was a couple of miles up the street. I just hop on the bus and get to the job. So I think we've all had experiences or a time where we had to rely on other folks because financially we weren't in the spot that we wanted to be. I can tell you, a few years ago, it had to be about 9-10 years ago before I bought my first home. My wife and I, we stayed with my in-laws for a period of time. And what that did was that allowed us to save money to buy our home. And so, as a provider, you do what you like. As a provider, I do what I need to do for my family. So staying with my in-laws wasn't ideal for me, but it enabled my daughters to have their own room. It enabled my wife to have a home, and so we were able to get into our first home. So, I think if you allow manhood to get in the way of you reaching out for help or assistance and I think that that can be problematic. And you can block a blessing that way too. I mean, we've all been there.
Right. It's funny because when you talk about manhood and saying, hey, I'm not going to ask for any help. Really, my thought process is if you have not understood that nobody is truly self-made and you're saying, oh, but I understand manhood. There's a lack of understanding in some component of manhood. If you understand that every single man has needed help at one point or another. And that's whether you're growing up into your manhood or you are in your manhood. It's just the types of help that I have needed as a man has been significantly greater than I need $20 so I can go to the school dance. Now it's like, no, I need like $1,500 because I need to pay my mortgage. It's due.
Right.
So the dynamic may change. I think the other aspect of that question about how did it make you feel? I think the first time a provider who's been in a provider role for like a significant period of time and kind of has lost his way on what it is to be the receiver. I think that first initial feeling is like, whoa, I was selling at a good clip here. And now all of a sudden I've struck a rock and I don't know if the boat's sinking completely. So there might be a little bit of panic. Shout out to Sylvia L for that. Don't panic. But there might be a little bit of panic that sets in, but then there might be a little bit of disappointment that sets in. Like, people are relying on me. Going back to Damien saying, that people are relying on you to make the right decision every time. people are relying on me. And not only have I let myself down for my standards, I'm letting down those people who are relying on me. And that's more than just in the financial component.
Right.
I struggle when it comes to being from the old school, when it comes to being a father. Like, I had to just make this commitment to my oldest son. Like, look, if I'm so frustrated with you that I can't talk to you without cussing at you, then I just can't talk to you yet. Like, I'm just not ready. Because the old school in me is like, if I have to cuss you out to get this point across, then that's what I'm going to have to do. So I understand, like, as a provider, that emotional support provider, it's like, okay, you can't just treat this person like a stranger just because there's a level of frustration. If you're truly trying to be a provider, you have to go into what your feelings are. Okay, my feelings in this case are, I'm frustrated and I'm agitated. And this little blessing of a child is the person who's causing that agitation. And in the real world, where you may not care about a stranger, and you may be more reckless with the words you choose, this is not a stranger. This is somebody you love and you care about. So you have to make sure that you're protecting and providing for their emotional stability in that as well.
Right.
So,
well, and that cuts both ways, right? Because we were talking about the job too. Now, and it's like in my job, we have a set of values that we need to adhere to, and that conversation have to be, it has to follow along with those values in the workplace.
right.
But I think for us, I think self-awareness is key. I think one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself is to be self-aware. I can tell you the luxury that I've had, Billy, that you haven't had, is I have daughters. And so, well, luxury in some ways, because
luxury price
these girls are expensive. But the luxury I have is that, and they're my three youngest. So and I told my boys, it's funny, when they both were young, I told them, look, I said, when you guys, this is your first lesson in life right now. When you guys turn 18, you're out of here. And so before you get there, figure it out. And I said, now the girls, on the other hand, can stay as long as they want. So this is your first example of life not being fair, but you guys got work to do. And they're out there doing work. But with my girls, Lanaya will be 16 in October, Bree is 11, and Brent is 7. And I can't speak to them the same way, right? They have forced me to be more self-aware, and to choose my words in a way that a provider would. Like you said, you can't talk to them like you just meeting them right off the street. They've actually have helped me in that self-awareness piece and that provider piece.
Right. It's funny that I really wish. I mean, I have two goddaughters, but I wish I had like just one daughter so I could see that contrast, because I know that it's different. Like,
right.
I mean, even with my goddaughters, it's like they do things and I'm like, yeah, it's okay that you did that. But you boys, no, all four or five, y'all better not ever do it. Let's go ahead and catch up in the chat, and then I want to move on to our next questions.
All right.
Let's see. Key Bryan says, like Damian Rowe mentioned above, a true provider suggests someone is depending on me to make all the right decisions. How do you prioritize the different areas you provide? For an example, providing financially versus fatherhood, or mental support versus work. I guess that is a question. I didn't see the question mark in that, but he's basically saying, how do you prioritize different areas you provide for? And so, like, whether you're talking about the financial side, the fatherhood side, the manager side, the mental stability side, the emotional stability side, how do you curtail that those provisions accordingly based on those different variances that come along?
Man, that's a juggling act that's pervasive. It's ongoing. It's something that I'm always trying to do, right? Fundamentally, obviously, my family is my priority. So I could be at work and something can happen. It's all about family. I can be sick, and if there's a need here, if I can walk, I'm gonna take care of that need. So fundamentally, I think my as a provider, my family's first. But for it's That's a good question. I mean, it's just a juggling act. I mean, it's situational also. There may be something going on at work where, I can probably manage without, having an impact on other aspects of my life. But that's a good question, Key. It's a challenge for me. Like I said, it's a juggling. It's something that I juggle with. I don't struggle with it, but I juggle with it pretty much every day.
Yeah, I think it's juggling, and you got to kind of fill it out. Sometimes you'll think you're supposed to be providing financially, and you'll find out, well, that's not what they need at this moment. But I'm still on this financial side. Let me shift my focus and juggle the next bowling pin for to move to emotional support or mental support. That's an area that I'm also challenged in as well, because I feel like many ways the way you were with your sons. Hey, at 18, I don't know what you want to do, but like I told my sons, you can stay here if you graduate and you're attempting to go to school, or you're attempting to go to craft, or you're attempting to start your career. You can stay with me until we get those things up. There's not a lot of grace period in that, but you can stay with me until you get those things up. But other than that, if you're just going to lay on my couch, eat up my food, run up my electricity bill, yeah, I'm sorry, my couch is not the couch you'll be surfing on. So I think it very much is that juggling act, but it's also I feel like it also can kind of be seasonal as well, because as a child grows from 2 to 5 to 10 to 12 to 16, there's just different milestones that they hit, and there's different levels of accountability that you have for them. And so where I'm learning right now with my oldest son is being able to pull back some of that armor that okay, well, I'm trying to tell you about how life is going to be, and I'm trying to show you that if you make the right decisions, you get the right results, and I'm trying to show you these things. But now I'm starting to realize, hey, look, you got less than 2 years before the world sees you as an adult. I need to start tapering some of that back and allowing you to fall and hit your face on the ground, and allowing you to feel some of that gravity on your own, and allowing you to carry some of that weight on your own. And you're going to probably make some bad decisions that I really wish as a provider I could just say, don't make that decision because it's not the right one. But I need to allow you to start practicing to make your own decisions while you're still in my household, and still have some kind of fail-safe to keep you from being out on the street.
Right. Yep. And we're in that space right now with my soon-to-be 16-year-old. My dad used to always say, if you don't know something, just ask a 15, 16-year-old, since they know it all. And so she's at that point now where she knows it all, and we kind of pulled back on her a little bit, and so she's got to figure some things out. But like you say, you still want to be close enough to where before she hits the ground, or after she hits the ground, you can kind of snatch her, pick her back up, and have that conversation when you have their attention.
Right.
So I agree there.
All right. So I think we have caught up. Damien says, thank you for your transparency, because a lot of men won't admit that they have asked for help. Thank you for your honesty. So going into that, let's dive into that a little bit deeper. The last thing you're talking about really kind of pulling back and going back when you have their attentions. How do you identify the area of need, or the area that you need to pour your provisions into? You talked a little bit about the juggling act, but how, like, in your juggling, how do you know what is the next object to catch for your provisions, or to provide provisions for?
Well, what I try to do is I try to be visionary, right? So I try to be forward thinking. So, what's happening, what's happening in the next month, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year, at least from a financial standpoint. And then right now, even right now with my girls, my oldest daughter is at a point now where she'll be a junior. She's in driver's training. She'll have junior prom. She'll have senior ball. So those are the things that are on my radar now. Not necessarily a priority, but they're on my radar. My youngest, so there's always something going on with them that's on my radar that I don't necessarily have to prioritize. It's just something I know I need to plan for and prepare for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you kind of have an idea of the things that are coming down the pipeline,
right?
Because of the timeline that you're in, or because of the age that they are, certain things driving and Now, all of a sudden, you're worried about texting and driving and answering your phone and having your friends in the car distracting you and treating it like it's a toy. Like there's certain things that do move into your peripheral vision. So I think that is a little bit of the forecasting of provisions. Like
exactly
what I'm going to have to deal with in the next 30, 60, 90 days in a year. So here's and this kind of echoes within Damien's question about asking for help. But in your experience, what happens when the provider fails?
Ooh. Well, I mean, that's a loaded question, right? Because that can be something as a minor setback for some, but it could be like depression, suicidal for someone else, right? As a provider, just depending on your situation, you as an individual. Like for me personally, if me being a provider fails, I can't see it completely failing. I may fail at an aspect of providing that I can recover from. So what that looks like, just a scenario. So maybe, as a provider, I failed at, I don't know. Give me an example, Billy.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you a fairy tale example and then see if you can bring it into reality for me.
Okay.
So a kingdom. There's, the area where the peasants live outside the gates. There's the gates, maybe a moat protecting the kingdom. And then there's like the main hall in a kingdom. And so if the kingdom comes under attack, they have to get through the peasants. Once they get through the peasants, if they make it through the gate, then everybody typically falls back to the main hall. So in this scenario where you're saying, I don't know if a provider actually fails, what I'm hearing from you is there's some fallbacks that may take place, which are setbacks. However, they are total annihilation of the provider. Like, oh my God, I'll never be able to provide anything of substance ever again. So if you bring that scenario for me into reality.
That was they're in the kingdom now, and everyone's kind of backed off into the room. As a provider, what I try to do is have a backup plan. So I think a lot of it has to do with outlook, right? So I don't ever see my role as a provider not meeting an expectation as a failure. Like in your words, it is a setback. And like, for instance, my biggest thing, the only thing that gives me anxiety is finances. If my finances ain't right, then, emotionally and mentally, I'm not right until I get it there. And in order for me to get there, I have to have conversations with my wife about our budget. And sometimes I have to have conversations with the older kids about the budget, why we can't, or why you can't do something, or why we can't take this Disney cruise. Because I have this car I want to pay off as opposed to going over here on this cruise. And I don't like being on a cruise ship anyway. But but I don't see them. I see that as setbacks for me. And what I try to do is have some sort of backup plan to where I can recover, and I don't have to recover tomorrow. And it could be a process to recover, but I just don't allow. I don't allow setbacks I don't allow failure as a provider, because I think there's the way I try to forecast and plan for things. I think there's always a resource or an option as a provider to meet the needs of those you're providing for.
Yeah, what that reminds me of is your first Intersation on Never Settle. That really at the point of failure, catastrophic failure, it's because you would have to choose to settle. And after doing an Intersation with you on Never Settle, that's probably why you don't see like, okay, I may have not executed the way I've seen or wanted to execute in this particular instance, but I'm not going to settle for not executing. I'm going to fall back, regroup, figure out what the strategy is, and move forward right back to that point until I can push through it. So
another key element is you did another Intersation on Don't Panic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to panic when you're the provider and there's a setback or a failure, right? Because so many people around you are probably panicking. So many people around you are impacted by it, whether it's in the workplace or at home. And so that's another key element is not to panic.
Yeah. And, I think not just not to panic, I think, and maybe this is tied up in panic, I don't know, but also not to, is the word exacerbate the story? Is that
To make it worse than what it really is.
yeah, like to make the story this grand delusion of
Made for TV drama.
yeah, like your lifetime TLC moment that you're about to have. Like you're about to have your lifetime special. I think that's part of it as well, is if you get caught up in spending all that time and that energy as a provider and making it the worst thing ever. As Sylvia addressed this very nicely last week, where she's like, hey, we thought we were going to be homeless and
Right.
just found out that we had to live in a hotel for a while, for a time. And so we always had a roof over our head. And sometimes when you, as a provider, say, oh my God, we're not going to have a roof over our head, that means we're going to starve to death. We're going to be at the mercy of the elements. Having that ability to say, okay, it's not that. It's really, we're going to have to fall back. We're going to have some setbacks, but we're going to be able to move through this and get back to and beyond where we were at, where we had to fall back from. So I think that all kinds of rolls up and plays in a part in it.
That's certainly a part of the provider role, right? Because as the provider, you need to level set when those conversations are happening, to reassure those that you're responsible for.
Right. And so on my next question, you kind of touched base on this from the question that Damien asked, but I want to ask it again just to see if there's any other insights you can shed. When the provider doesn't have the resources to give basically of themselves, can they still meet the needs for the situation? And if
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
do that.
Yeah, I don't, you know what? I don't believe when generally when people hear I don't have resources, they think about money.
Mm-hmm.
And kids aren't thinking about money. Folks that in the workplace isn't thinking about money. Oftentimes it's time, undivided time. It's your level of engagement. It's you being supportive. You may not have the resources that you think you need, but there's resources out there that folks can leverage to provide. I just don't believe that resources are that scarce to where you can't find a way to contribute, because you can.
Yeah, no, I'm 100%. I just wanted to hear it come out. I'm 100% with you on that. It's like, hey, look, as I said, I might be good at math and horrible at English. But as a provider, my role is to find the tutor who is excellent at English to get what it is that you need. And that's from the parental fatherhood matrix. But, even just as the friend, like, hey, I might be the shoulder to cry on today because I have, like you said, the time to be that. But then there might be a time where I don't have the time to be that. So it's a matter of, okay, well, as the provider to this friendship, or not always in the provider role, but as a person who cares about this friend and wants the best for them, how do I get them the resources that they need, even though I know I'm not the person who's capable of providing it right now? And that might be direct in that conversation. Hey, have you talked to our other friend, or have you taken time to journal about that? Or whatever it may be, is trying to get them those resources that they need. So,
and that's what I do every day at work. Brian, who can you refer me to deal with this issue? Contact so and so. Hey, Brian, I need some help here. Contact so and so. I'm like a traffic cop, or just directing folks to other people all day, because I may not know it, or I may know it and just think that somebody else is just a better resource. Or like you said, I just don't have the time to commit to this right now, but reach out to so-and-so. They can help you out.
Right. So we're almost an hour in, cousin. Dang, that went fast. All right. We're going to start wrapping up a little bit, but I got a couple more questions I want to run by you really quick. So as a provider, being in the role of a provider, What has that role highlighted for you in the areas of your strengths and your weaknesses?
Wow. I don't know. Weaknesses is going to be a challenge. Uh, but I can tell you this, and it's sometimes as a man, it's difficult to admit some of our strengths, right? Like when I look at my dad, solid dude, but he grew up in a different era, right? My dad was unemotional. I think I might have hugged and kissed my dad the first time when I was in my 30s. But that's just the era he grew up in. And for me, it's like, some of the strengths that I have as a provider is being resourceful. Obviously, being educated doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't a good provider, but certainly being educated can open up some additional avenues for you to provide for those folks you're responsible for. I'm determined, and then here's where I think I've evolved is because of my girls. I'm sensitive, supportive, engaged. I'm available to the extent that I can be, sometimes to my own detriment. I'm nurturing, I'm affectionate. These are words you don't usually hear from men. But that's my reality. These are the things that I know. If my daughters walk through this door right now and they need me to be supportive, they need me to be understanding, they need me to be nurturing, they know they can come to me because they're going to get that from me.
Right.
So I think these are a lot of the strengths that I bring to the table. Certainly responsible, dependable, those things. Areas of opportunity.
That corporate lingo, area of opportunity.
Yeah, that word weakness. That word weakness hurts. But I can tell you this. I think Bryan and Sean Damien kind of touched on it, or it might have been Mark. Is that one of the opportunities that I have is, in order for me to be a provider for those in my space, I really need to take care of me. I really need that downtime. I really need that away time without feeling guilty. And I think that's where I can get better, because I'm no good to them if I can't take care of myself. So certainly that's a huge weakness for me in the area of providing.
Mm. And so you bring up another area. I told you we're going everywhere today. You bring up another area. Really, sometimes the area that we lack being the provider in is the area of providing for ourselves. And that's
Right.
what you're talking about, is creating that space to be able to nurture yourself. You're like, hey, if my daughter's kicking the door right now, they need me to be emotionally present. Hey, I love you guys on the Intersation. I got to go.
Right.
But when we emotionally, internally kick in the doors on ourselves, we're like, hey, I got some things I need to take care of. I don't have time to deal with this right now. And then you self emotionally or provisionally bankrupt to where you can't provide anything for anybody because your internal climate is so chaotic. So I think that's a good thing that you just brought out in that comment. The next question I want to ask, and before I ask this question, I actually want, for those who are still rocking with us in the live chat, to take a moment to post in the live chat from this Intersation tonight what your takeaway has been. Just one takeaway that, if somebody's watching and is looking in the live chat during the replay, what takeaway you would want them to be able to hear or see or get from tonight's content. And maybe, who knows, maybe you guys will have some of the same takeaways. But I have a couple more questions for you, cousin, and then we'll wrap it up. But
all right.
For you, as a provider, what are some of the ways you determine if the provision is yours to give, or if that provision really is none of your business? Even though you may have the resource to give, it is not the proper situation to give it.
Yeah. So, in a workplace, it's easy. I mean, I know where my space is. At work, I know where my team is. I'm cognizant of not stepping on toes of my peers. Other divisions, senior managers, directors. That part. I think it's a no-brainer. As much as I want to help, or even if I do help at work, I kind of, even if I do, if it's not, in my lot to manage, and if I feel like I have something to offer, I'll have a conversation before with the folks that's is truly in their lot before I, kind of indulge and step into that. But in my personal space, I mean, as a provider, you always want to help, right? But you're right. Some things just, hey, look, I'd love to help you, but I just, this ain't my thing.
Right.
And I'm pretty good about trying to remain drama free. And it's not that, some people, look at me and probably say, well, Bryan stuck up, or Bryan, he doesn't care, or whatever. And none of that is that's just furthest from the truth. It's just, I don't like bringing drama to my doorstep. So, if there's some provisions I can offer that's not going to step on toes or impact people inadvertently or disrespect people, I'm all in. But if I feel like, just based on the information I have, that this isn't a good scenario for me to be in, then I just won't engage.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
another thing you got to kind of feel out, right? Because you may not have all the information. And then here you are, you kind of stepped into something where you weren't informed, and now you find yourself, offering provisions that really truly isn't your business.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I've been in that situation as a kid where my godparents were trying to offer a provision for me, but they just kind of assumed that everything was cool with my parents, and when my parents got involved, they were like, "Yeah, no, sounds good, but that's not a provision we want you to provide for our son at this time."
Right, right.
So I agree with that. Is really about getting as much information as you can in the reasonable time that you can get it, before you just go out throwing out provisions every which way.
Right.
So a couple people that put some takeaways. I'm going to ask you this question, read their takeaways, and then give you the opportunity to answer the question. So for you tonight, if there were 2 or 3 points that you would want people to take away from this live Intersation, whether they're watching live right now or they're watching via the replay, what would those key points be? While you think about that, I want to bring in the takeaways that Bob McKinley shared. Before you provide for others, you need to provide for yourself. Time. Key Bryant said, takeaway, being a provider is understanding when someone else might be a better provider in a certain area than yourself, being able to delegate or refer the role to someone else.
Yep.
Also understand, in order to be a good provider, you need to make sure the areas that you need provisions, that the areas that I'm thinking it's supposed to say need provisions are taken care of. Oh, that you need provisions are taken care of. So basically that internal climate, take care of yourself first. True. Sylvia L says, yes, you need to provide for yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. Janae says, takeaway, being the main supporter in the home should include being equally supportive of your own needs as well. A lot of people are getting that internal provision. What did you get, cousin, from the two to three that you have?
And I can tell you one of them is a consistent theme that you just read in the chat, is just making time for yourself. Like I said, it's something that I don't do enough of. It's something that I know I should be doing. And so that's certainly a takeaway is, and I like the way Sylvia put it. You need time to provide for yourself first. They tell you that on the plane, in the event of a water landing, make sure or the mask come down, you put yours on first before you help the kid sitting
Right.
next to you. So that's certainly one of the main takeaways. Another one is just, be an active participant, despite your social economic situation. I think oftentimes we use our social and economic status as a scapegoat or a means to not find creative ways to continue providing during those times when we aren't necessarily doing our best. So certainly be an active participant despite your social economic situation. And also, I think just understanding the unique and important way that men influence and contribute to the lives of children and our families. I think the role of a provider, I don't take it lightly, and it's not a position to take lightly, but I just don't think we always understand how important this unique situation is for us.
I like that. No, you're right. We don't understand. We even when we take it seriously, I sometimes think we still don't grasp the full importance of what the role of a provider is.
Right.
We go to work every day, we bring home money, we try to make sure we do the right thing, make the right decisions so that we're here to be available to provide. And then you turn around and it's like, dang, there's still more beyond just the scope of that. Really quick, it looks like Jay says, I wanted to be a provider and protector for most of my life, but after seeing a lot of my friends get Dear John letters and divorce papers on deployment and empty bank accounts when returning home, I saw that this day and age, it's just too risky to be that guy. And I think really what if I'm hearing you correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about not taking that role of a provider lightly. Like a lot of people jump into marriage and jump into fatherhood and motherhood, taking those roles lightly. And then when the rubber hits the road or when the stuff hits the fan, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to provide this. And I remember doing a Wednesday word about are you in love or are you in like? And I was saying,
Right.
how I determine whether I'm in love or not is based on if I'm willing to do the work. Because if I'm no longer willing to do the work, I cannot effectively be in love with you because I'm not going to be actively making the decisions that show or display actions of love. So being willing to say like, hey, as a provider, I don't have it. Like I'm in the midst of being separated and going through a divorce right now. Being a provider is about also being honest and transparent. When you're not there as a provider, it is critical to say, hey, that base or that foundation or that safety net that you are accustomed to me being, I'm not there anymore. So at least you have the opportunity to get off the bridge or get off the tightrope before I move this net, and then you just hit the ground. So that's
Right.
the other role of a provider is being honest, even when it means telling somebody that, hey, I'm no longer in the position to give you the provisions. So, cousin, I really thank you for taking the time to just sit and rap tonight. I told you we were kind of going to go every which way, and it did exactly what I said. Probably primarily because of me and my mind as you're talking. But I really do thank you for taking your time out, spending time with me on the Intersations, all the support that you've given me on the first row. I definitely appreciate you for it.
I got you. You know that.
Hey, gotcha. But definitely you gave some nuggets and some gems. I think what everybody is taking away is really about self-ministry, self-provisions, making sure that they take time to pour into themselves so that they have provisions to give. With that being said, before we get the full wrap of this show, I want to give you guys something that I call tools for the first row. If you guys are new to the channel, new to the network of First Row, where that name comes from is number one, it's a play on my last name, WROE. So First Row. But it comes from when I was younger, I had a business mentor who taught me two things about the first row. He said, people who sit on the first row, they make the most money and they get the most information because there is no distraction between them and the person speaking and giving the information. And so that's where I took that name from. I kind of was like, ooh, first row. Hey, my last name is Row. I can make that work. But I want to give you guys something I call tools for the first row. These are just tools that I started thinking about when I started thinking about this topic and really trying to get into asking what type of questions I wanted. And it's funny because out of all the stuff that we talked about, I feel like these tools are almost running parallel because it's about the provider role, but they run parallel to the conversation. They don't necessarily interweave into the conversation. So I got just as much from this Intersation as I got from the time reflecting on the actual information and the questions.
Right. So
the very first tool that I came up with when it comes to the provider role was know when and what provisions to provide. And the reason this tool was important to me, going back to that, it's none of your business. Sometimes what we do is we jump into the wrong provider relationships. And in jumping into that provider relationship, we drain ourselves of our resources, our energy, our time, our effort, our happiness, our emotional stability. We drain ourselves because we're in the wrong position. So I'll give you an example in a minute. But because we're in the wrong position, we basically drain ourselves. And so then when it comes time to be the provider that we need to be in other areas, we now don't have the bandwidth. We now don't have the resources to pour into the people that we love and we care about. So you may see this, let's say a person has a host of friends. I have a lot of friends, actually. I'll use myself. I have tons and tons and tons of friends. And I don't mean like Facebook friends. I mean actual friends. But because I have so many friends, it's easy for me to like go from drama to 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 drama. So because it's easy to go from drama to drama to drama, because different people have different dramas on different days, I have to be aware of, okay, who's bringing drama every week? Because if you're bringing drama every week, I'll help you on week 1. And on week 2, I'm going to start asking you some really difficult questions. But week 3, you can't just keep coming to me and bombarding me with the drama, because guess what? I have 3 sons and they are row boys. We are known for the of hard-headedness. So because of that, it's like I have my own internal drama that I have to deal with. So this is what I mean by know when and what provisions you should provide, because if I'm giving everything that I have to friends and friends and friends and friends and friends, when it comes time to give the provisions to my children who need me as a father and as a male guide through their to their manhood, I may not have it because I allowed my battery or my patience or my mental state to be drained by somebody who is going to come back week after week. So as you will know, if you've been my friend and you've had a very dramatic situation where they say Big Daddy Rowe had to show up, or if Big Daddy Rowe had to show up, you only get one of those Big Daddy Rowe shows up. And then after that, if you make those same decisions, Big Daddy Rowe ain't coming to, I don't got a cape. I'm not faster than a speeding bullet. So that's the first tool. Know when and what provisions to provide. The second tool is don't slip into enabler mode or punisher mode. And I tend to fall towards the punisher mode, not the enabler mode.
Hey, self-aware.
Hey, I'm just calling it like I see it. I know which mode I fall into, but don't slip into that enabler mode or that punisher mode. And so I'm going to actually read these notes here that I have. The enabler mode is basically sometimes our emotions will cause us to provide when we should refrain from providing. We feel sorry for the person. We feel like we owe it for them. We feel like we'll use the past. Oh, well, I've known them for 30 years and, they need me. I gotta be there. And so we'll enable them to repetitively go into bad decisions that cause them to need provisions because we're enabling them. I mean, I've had family members who have OD'd on drugs. And I remember when they used to show up at our house, my mom would be like, hey, look, you can't come in. I'll give you a plate so you can eat. But that's the most you get, like right. A plate, and you got to stay outside. I'll bring the plate to you. It's going to be a paper plate. Make sure you leave my wicker paper plate holder. You remember those, the wicker paper plate holders? Leave my wicker paper plate holder in the yard. But that is to not move into that enabler. Like if it's like, oh, well, you can go and make all these bad mistakes and decisions. And then at the end of the day, you come back and I'm going to embrace you with open arms every single time. You need $100. I'm going to give it to you. Oh, you smoked up that $100. Okay, well, you need another $100. I'm going to give it to you. Like at some point, you got to make sure you're not slipping into the enabler mode. Now, the other mode, the opposite is the punisher mode. I'll tell you, I'm very adept in the punisher mode, the provider role. But you have to, it's still an emotional trigger, I believe. It could be right. Something, but I believe it's still an emotional trigger. But it's almost like kindergarten in mindset. Well, you didn't share your crown with me, so I'm not your friend. And so you go into punish mode. You're punishing the person for not sharing their crown with you. So now you're not going to share your friendship with them. And many times I find myself in this role as a father, where my kids are not listening to the instructions that I am giving them. And so now I refrain provisions from them. Now, within there are some things within reason. I mean, you can't like send your kid, like you said, on a cruise and they're just wilding. You can't do that. Well, you can. I don't recommend you do it. but there's other things. So like right now with my oldest son and I, we're dealing with some school struggles on him keeping his grades up. And I'm like, hey, look, we're going to make this very simple. While your grades are where they're supposed to be at, you will have access to certain resources in the house that are luxury resources, like Oreo cookies and, cookie butter instead of peanut butter. Like you'll have access to those things. But when you're not doing your job and your grades are not where they need to be, yeah, that stuff goes away, because I don't want you to get too accustomed to a lifestyle that you won't be able to live. You won't be living that Oreo cookie package lifestyle if you ain't making the right decisions. So it's easy to slip into either or. It's easy to feel empathy and sympathy for somebody, and because of your love and care for their well-being, to slip into that enabler mode. And it's easy from your hurt and your disappointment and your frustration to slip into that punisher mode where you're like, I'm not messing with you, hands down, for the duration. I don't care. So really you have to find that happy medium that is, hey, in spite of my emotions, the provisions that, number one, I mean, legally you're required to provide legal provisions for your children, but the provisions that I'm supposed to provide for you just as a good person, like I'm going to come through on those things. So even today, like I was telling you before we went on live, cousin, about me going grocery shopping. Yeah, I may not get you Oreo cookies, but I'm gonna get you some food. I'm not gonna let you like starve, So that's what the second tool. And I'm sorry I was a little wordy on that one, but the punishment mode really resonates with your boy. So I had to really make sure I grounded that home. So that's tool number 2. Don't slip into the enabler mode or punisher mode. And then the last tool that I came up with was don't confuse your role as a provider as a fixer. I think that's sometimes the trap we run into when we are in a provider mindset, that we see the gaps, we see the hurt, we see the depression, we see these things, and so we run in like knights in shining armor. And that you could be a woman running in like a knight in shining armor too. Don't get that twisted. Or you run in and you run into that mechanic trap, that car that you bought, and there's more things on it to fix than there are things not to fix. And so you spend more time trying to fix the person or change the person with your provisions. Oh, well, I'm just going to show them what kindness is. Oh, or you're going to show them what having a person that you can run over is, and they'll take advantage of that. So don't confuse the fact that you are a provider with the fact that you have to, or with the role of being a fixer. Just because you're providing something does not mean you have to fix somebody or their situation. So that's the 3 tools that I came up with. I wanted to be less wordy on that one. But the first tool being know when and what provisions to provide. The second one being don't slip into enabler mode or punisher mode. And then number 3 is don't confuse your role as a provider as a fixer or for a fixer. With that, I'm just going to catch up the chat one more time because it looks like some more things took place while I was not looking there. Looks like Janae says, great topic, fellas. Thank you, cousin. Appreciate it. Damian Rose says, great segment, gents. You both shared some very helpful solution-based information. Thank you. Brian, you're thanking them. I miss you too, cousin. I'll see you on my next trip. And Jamal, I didn't say it properly. I meant if I'm clearly if I'm clearly a great provider, protector, and a good husband, but I can lose what I love the most based on someone else's opinion, not facts, I'd rather not risk it. I love the show, though, cousin. I'm glad I didn't miss it this time. I'm glad you could be on, too, from way out of Japan. I appreciate you. Other than that, you guys, I definitely appreciate you guys being on tonight, rocking with us wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
We actually have live content tomorrow on the first row. It'll be the Wednesday Word. That's at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow's topic will be, what are you attracted to? It's not what you think, but you definitely, I'm going to say you might want to come back for that one because there's a lot of things that we were going to be talking about in that particular segment. Other than that, if you guys haven't already, please take a moment out of your time to click that like button, click that subscription button. And when you click subscribe, there's a bell that will show. You can click that bell to be notified when we are live on the first row. There's just a ton of growth, and I'm looking forward to, this is like only the beginning of the second quarter. I'm looking forward to the massive amount of growth that this network is going to provide, hopefully to thousands and eventually millions of people. So again, if you guys want to rock with a topic, or if you have a topic idea, please send that topic idea to topics@firstrow.com. That's topics@1STWROE. I'm happy to look at that topic. And if we use that topic on a live show, we will definitely give you a shout out for it. But other than that, as always, if you like this video, share it. If you share this video, like it. We are happy to engage with you in the live chat. We're also happy to engage with you in the comments on the replay up until the first week of the content up until the content has been released for up to a week. And then at that point, we move on to the next content. But other than that, I thank you guys for tuning in tonight live. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless.